no numbers, there's no pictures, there's no videos, there's no gameplay. I don't like it.
Yo, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. And today, Freemers, we are back with another Free Realm Sunrise video. This time around, we're going to be discussing Sunrise Stories. So this, I feel like this project, like all the writing and stuff, Luck of the Draw happened because I got inspired to write my own version of events and kind of make things make more sense and piece more things together. And that was my whole reason for doing Luck of the Draw. Sunrise Stories was never going to happen. Like, I didn't think about doing it until the community kind of gave me ideas. Like, there was a whole writing competition, right, where we got to write our own story. The whole thing was crazy, bro. There was lots of drama that came out after it. It was wild. Led to me leaving the Free Realm Sunrise Discord. The whole thing. But there was also like another instance where like we got to name like a Free Realms cat. It was kind of like there were community things that were going on in the Discord that inspired me to write. That's the whole reason Sunrise Stories exists, and it also inspired me to continue on with writing more. So like, because you know there was a story called Royalty, and then I forget what the other story was called, but it's the very last one in Sunrise Stories, but we'll go over it. But basically, like, stories that I wrote that made me want to continue writing again. And including those in there was like, okay, so maybe there could be this third story that could come out way later, but I'd have to build on it. And, dude, like, I think Sunrise Stories, like, without the community, I probably would have never wrote this. Like, Luck of the Draw would have been it. And I think, like, you know, if Luck of the Draw was the only story that was there, I think I would have been content with it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this thing, huh? So again, kind of like with Luck of the Draw, with Realm War, I revised Sunrise Stories, got its own little graphic for it for the front cover. 180 pages, that's down from like over 200. I basically made like 600 pages worth of stories, which is crazy. Then you've got the back cover as well. Sunrise Stories, an illustrated novel. Sunrise Stories, the bridge between telling the stories after the events of Luck of the Draw and before the events of the Realm War. So this is kind of the bridge, the in-between of everything. And obviously the first story that is in Sunrise Stories is Regret. This is a true story that happened in Free Realms by me. Like, a lot of people don't believe that this story happened. A lot of people are like, nah, that's not real, man. That's not real. You're lying about that. No, it is a real story. Like, I was in the Renegade Guild in Free Realms, like, actually. And I met this guy named Ragman. He gave me sports shades. It was like, dude, it's wild because a lot of people think it's fake, and it's not. It's a true story. I can't lie about this because I remember it so vividly, because I remember when I was a kid, I was losing my mind over losing these sports shades. I was losing my mind over the fact that, oh, now I have to tell Ragman about this whole thing. So it was like, it's wild that people do think it's fake, but yeah, no, this whole story is real, man. And also Sunrise Stories is where I included more imagery. This is kind of where, like, you know, I evolved from Luck of the Draw, and I was like, okay, I need to do more than just put text on the screen. I need to do more. That's as simple as it goes, but it's a true story, man. I wish more people would believe it. But then you've got Royalty. This is the story basically that I was going to start with Sunrise Stories, but Regret was so good, I decided to throw it in at the top. I could have put it somewhere in the middle, but like, you know what? It was a part of the writing competition. I felt like if I didn't do anything with the story, I would let it go to waste. So that's why it's in here in the first place. But yeah, man, Royalty is kind of telling a story about kind of what's going to happen in the Realm War, kind of like of things to come, you know? And that's the whole point of this whole story is in Samurai Stories. I wanted to start to build a narrative for the Realm War, even though it wasn't there yet. And this is the one story that I was building off of. Obviously introducing the Gleamstone, which definitely a huge story that I wanted to start, because I thought, you know what? There can't just be a Gloamstone. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like there would have to be another artifact. But yeah, and then of course you got Lineage. Lineage is basically an inspired story. That, like, you know, I saw this picture of the zoo in Lakeshore, and I was like, I could do something with this. And there was a character, I forget his name, Edwin. Yeah, Edwin. And Edwin, that first name, is an artist for Free Realms. He was apparently the artist for like TCG and all that sort of stuff. He died, I think, of I can't remember what it was. It might have been cancer or something like that, but he died, and I got inspired to write a story about him and kind of make things connect. It's not like a story that goes forward in... There's a lot of stories in Sunrise Stories that don't go forward in the Realm War, and you know, that's to be expected. But I think my whole thing with it is like I just wanted to write a bunch of stories that I was inspired to make. And then of course you've got Homestead. Homestead is like, it's like kind of an event of, like, a lot of these stories, they're what happened after Luck of the Draw. And to me, I think that's super important. Just in my opinion, I think it's a super important story to tell. I think a lot of these stories, they're super important to tell. At least in my opinion. And I liked writing them a lot. Like, Lineage is talking about how Edwin lost his father to the Glum invasion. Homestead talks about how a farmer is going through rough times, and it's actually where I introduced the cat Snowberry that got named in the community. This is one of those stories I wrote where it's like I was inspired to write something about Snowberry. So yeah, again, without the community, a lot of these stories would not have happened. So yeah, I think this is a really good story just because it talks about, like, you know, someone down on their luck and like, hey, this cat just saved everything, you know? And then of course Culture. Culture is a story that does play into the Realm War, but it doesn't play too much into it, but it's still like, it still plays a huge part. It's like, you know, Darkthorn's trying to build a Chugawug army, and Junior is one of the people who kind of hinders that. So that's kind of like one thing I wanted to do there. But I wanted to build basically a story around Chugawugs a little bit, and like how they should all come together, how they've all been kind of split apart. And that was the goal with that story. But yeah, and then of course the end of this kind of plays into what's going to happen in the Realm War and all that sort of stuff. But and then of course you've got Burnout going over. Obviously, I do think like Burnout for me is my favorite story in this entire thing, because I was just really inspired to write about it. Write about like racing, and there was so much TCG art about racing. I could tell like I needed to do a story about this. And of course, Cale Yardbird, he's in the Realm War. He's like a main character, to sort of speak. And Cale's story is like, super, super deep. Like, it's not just, you know, racing on a track, but there is a deeper story with Kale, and that's the whole reason I wanted to write it. So, yeah, and I mean, dude, I think this is the longest story in here, too. I could be wrong about that, but this is a super long story, and there's a lot of characters that are introduced in it, and it's just, it's wild, man. It's super cool. I think I loved writing Burnout just because I think for me personally, I really got to just I'm blanking on my words here, but I really got to explore like my writing, how I want to write. Hold on one second before we keep going here. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. The Burnout for me, I think, even though it's a really long story and there's a lot of lore to it, I really get to explore like how I can write in this with imagery, and I think that's kind of what pushed Relmore to be what it is. At least that's for me. Like I think I really got to express how I can write with this story. It's just a really good story too. Burnout is like so many characters, so much going on, and introducing a new type of racing into it is like, it's cool, man. It was cool to do. And yeah, definitely the longest thing I've ever wrote in just one story. And also the story itself, it is like what happened after the Glum invasion. So that was another thing too. But the other thing about these stories is like you get to see like the behind the scenes of what happened to everyone, you know? Like I think there's questions about like, you know, the Glum invasion happened, you know, you saw what happened with Bryce, Jessica, like you saw what happened with main characters Luck of the Draw, but then like you start to ask questions about after Luck of the Draw. It's like, what happened to the people in Sacred Grove? And that's my whole reason for writing this, I think, in the first place. Even though I wasn't intending on writing it, I think it was just important to write about. And then, of course, you got Riptide. Riptide is kind of a weird one. It's mostly about cooking. It's about the Seaside Cafe, which I was inspired to write about that because I have a hoodie that says Seaside Cafe on it from Redbubble. Someone made some artwork for it, and I thought that was super cool. But then the story I wrote about Seaside Cafe is like it gets destroyed during the Glum invasion, and then Diggy, the owner of the cafe, is forced to rebuild, and he builds a new restaurant with Chef Bourdon Clue. And this is one of those stories that is not included. The Snowberry one isn't included in the Realm War at all. This is another story that's not really included in the Realm War. Like, you can read these stories and be like, oh, this seems like it could go forward in the stories, but this one was like, it felt like it had a good ending to it. Like, you know, made a new restaurant, cool. There's not a lot of story there that could fit into the Realm War. But there was also like a lot of chef imagery, and that's in the TCG art, and that's why I wanted to write about it. But yeah, man. And then of course, after Riptide, you've got Spark. Spark is another story that is not in the Realm War, but the whole story itself talks about like Jamie Swift's song and like how she needs to learn to slow down. She likes working alone, but then she's forced to work with someone. And I wanted to tell a story about like the penguins and the mail and all that sort of stuff. I know it might be a boring story, but I thought it's kind of interesting to see what the post men and women deal with. You know, I don't know. I thought it was a cool little story because I did write about a postman in Luck of the Draw, and I wanted to write more about it. And yeah, I did, and I thought it was a decent story. I liked building a relationship with Jamie and this other guy. What was his name? He had a name. Josh Flashrod. Which I wrote it weird because I saw someone's name like that, and I was like, that's funny. That's really cool. But yeah, and then of course the story kind of ends on a good note, and then of course Endure, which Endure is like its whole own little story about Chatty and the other Treebles and what happened during the Glum invasion and after. But yeah, it was basically like the story of like what happened to the Treebles during the Glum invasion, and of course most of them went extinct except Chatty and his friends. And I ended it on this sort of cliffhanger that leads into the Realm War. They are a huge part of the Realm War, kind of like Kill Yardbird. Again, a lot of characters from this I do include in the Realm War. And then of course the whole Endure Survive story combo, got that from Last of Us, but I think it's such a cool idea, like Endure and then Survive. So like you've got this pairing story of like Chatty and the Treebles to Robbie, and this is Robbie's side of what happened to him during the Glum invasion and then afterwards. After all was said and done, he went to Sunstone Valley to work on stuff, work on scrap, and then he got taken to Glimmer Deep to go home. And I wanted to give Robbie his own little purpose, you know, have him enjoy life in Glimmer Deep. I thought that was super neat. So yeah. Then of course Separated. This is an inspired story. I asked someone if I could use their character and they said no, but then I was like, okay. So I decided to use my own version of their character that's not theirs, but I at least asked permission first, and I basically built my own character. But the whole Separated story doesn't go into the Realm War, but it's like there's a character literally named I forget what his name is, but there's like a Shaggy looking character in this, and I tried to make a noir kind of storyline. I thought it was cool. So I did that, and this was kind of a random story. And then the next story I believe is also really random, called Alteration. Yeah, Alteration's like what happens if 3 friends messed with the shuffle shooter and we're able to do stuff with a bunch of different rounds. And I thought it was so funny to mess with it, and like, yeah, what if they just shrunk everyone's head small, or turn things into marshmallows or cupcakes, or what if they turn things into cards? This one was, again, another random story, but I threw a lot of random stories into here just to have fun with it. And then of course Forged, which this story actually pulls from Luck of the Draw with with Nervy. She was a character that was that had relations with Darkcheat. But Forged was like a lot about like the blacksmiths, and I thought it would be a cool story to make. I liked writing it. It was fun. And then of course Trauma. Trauma is about medics and them basically saving the life of someone. Thought that was a fun story to write about. Ancestry is about the aftermath of the Glum invasion, but the dwarves being like, what if we're treated differently because of Darkcheat? And that whole conversation is just this with some imagery tied to it. And then of course Presage, which is the last story that leads into the Realm War. Honestly, this story like introduced 2 new characters, but basically had Chugsy going back to Silver Hills to be like, I gotta tell someone about what's going on with Valerian. And dude, I thought it was the perfect story to write for like what happens in the Realm War. I don't know. I really wanted to write a 3rd installment of lore, and I think I did a really good job. And we're going to talk about that in the next video. But anywho, thank you guys for watching. If you did, as always, I appreciate it a ton. I will see you guys in the next video. And yeah, goodbye.